Do you dream of having an overseas experience with your family, but unsure how to make it happen? Do you want your kids to grow up with an innate understanding of the world? And are things like cultural empathy, language immersion, and global awareness important to you to weave into your family's education? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then this episode is for you. Join me as I speak with Rekha Magon of Boundless Life, where we dive deep into why global citizenship should be a core part of our children's education. Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of the Transform with Travel podcast. I'm super grateful that you're here with me today. And we are celebrating all month long for Mother's Day here in the month of May, where we're discussing different topics around family travel and how the world of travel can really open your family up to a world of possibility. I'm really, really excited for today's episode because we have one of the co founders of Boundless Life, Rekha Magon, here on the pod. And back in episode 55, we had their other co founder, Elodie for Show, on the podcast as well. And I couldn't wait to have more Boundless Life on this podcast, not only from a selfish personal reason because we're considering very seriously joining next year for one of their programs, but also because I just believe so firmly in their mission as a turnkey solution that empowers families to live, work, and learn while exploring the world. I've traveled to 12 or so countries now with my children, and the solution, the product, the service that Boundless Life offers to be able to open the world of slow travel and offering amazing opportunities of incredible education and co-working centers and community. I think that's a big piece when you travel with your family, more from a long-term perspective, that you miss a piece of that community. The way that they bridge this all together as a service for families around the world in their 7 locations, it blows my mind that this is something that's available to us as families. And I've been preaching it from the rooftops to anyone that would listen to me. I literally just got an email this morning from a client who I mentioned this to, and she was like, oh my God, I just went down a rabbit hole of their Estepona, Andalusia location in Spain. It's one of those things that once you see it and you can get a feel for what they're offering, you can't go back. But back to the episode. So Rekha Magon is the co-founder and chief education officer at Boundless Life. And Rekha is a strong advocate for place-based education, world schooling, and global citizenship. She's committed to redefining learning through real-world experiences that spark curiosity and creativity. And we talk a lot about this in the episode, what is place-based education and what is more important, memorizing and getting a 100 on a standardized test, or really cultivating a love of learning and curiosity and creativity, which is going to take our kids so much farther in a world that is changing faster than ever before, with jobs that are getting created that weren't even available 2 months ago, right? And Rekha really is a visionary in the educational space, motivated by her dissatisfaction with the traditional education system and a desire to create something better for her children. She transitioned from a corporate auditor at KPMG to a homeschooler. And eventually she became an ed tech entrepreneur and an education thought leader. So she truly is a visionary, a pioneer in this space, especially for families that place value on world schooling and global citizenship and global competency. And we're really grateful to have just a sliver of her time today to learn more about what Boundless Life offers, why it's important, and why perhaps the traditional educational model is not the only option, but it might not be even the best option that's out there these days. So without further ado, let's get into the episode, and I'll see you on the other side. Hey everyone, I'm joined today by Rekha Magon, co-founder and head of education of Boundless Life, which is a turnkey solution for families to live, work, and learn while experiencing the world. And I actually interviewed one of the other co-founders, Elodie for Show, back in December, which is episode 55 for those who missed that episode. And we talked a lot about the benefits to both the children and the parents of slow travel and global living. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about why global citizenship and curriculum and expanding a child's worldview should be a core curriculum subject, and why today's traditional model of education may not be the best option, and it's definitely not the only option. So welcome, Rekha. I'm really, really grateful that you're tuning in all the way from Montenegro, which is one of your Boundless Life locations. So thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Kelly. I'm happy to be on.
You're the co-founder of Boundless Life. And for those that have been listening to the podcast for a while or in my general vicinity, I've been sharing about Boundless Life everywhere that I can. Can you share what sparked the shift in your life to create something like Boundless Life and how Boundless Life supports families around the world?
I mean, Boundless Life was born for me during a time where I was like literally forced to pause. So when I was pregnant with our first child, I was actually put on very strict bed rest. So for 5 months, I had to lay on an incline with
Wow.
my legs higher than my torso, and I wasn't allowed to move. I wasn't allowed to get up, go to the bathroom. I wasn't allowed to sit up to even eat a meal. So there I was for 5 months with a laptop kind of suspended over my head. And as challenging, mentally as that period was for me, it really gave me this rare opportunity to stop and reflect, which I think very few people get in this day and age. And during that time, I really just started questioning everything, right? So, like, what kind of life do I want for my children as a new mom? What kind of world do I want to prepare them for? And, I realized when I was on bed rest, I was like, man, like, here we are about to send our kids into this system that hasn't evolved in 200 years. It's kind of like, I always just think it's like teaching them how to use a rotary phone in a world of smartphones. Everyone would laugh at you if we even thought of doing that. But essentially, that's what it felt like we were doing in education. So it was, yeah, during when I was on bed rest during my first pregnancy that I think kind of sparked the realization that I wanted something different for my own family when it came to the way they were going to be raised, how they were going to be educated. And that's kind of what sparked the initial stages of Boundless Life, which is now this global learning and living experience for families who also believe there's another way to live. So what we basically do with Boundless Life is bring together families to beautiful destinations across the world. And we provide a very immersive education system for their children, very intentional community building, co-working space for them to work in. And all of that, I would say, is built around the belief that the world is, the best classroom for any child.
I love that. And where was your first location? Where did you decide, okay, this is going to be where we're launching?
So our first location is in Sintra, Portugal. So that was our
Okay.
very first one. I still feel like that's kind of my baby.
Right, right.
It was the very first one. So Sintra is beautiful. It's this magical kind of fairy tale like town. It's 30 minutes from Lisbon. So you can still kind of hop in a train and be into a major city, but you feel like you're living in this picturesque, magical little town that's full of castles and greenery.
I love that. Was there something in particular about Portugal, and I guess in any of your locations, where you decide that it's a good, like you said, playground for education and, safe for the families? Like, what is it about each location that you guys decide to set roots and invite families around the world?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's important to us is like kind of smaller towns that have less than 100,000 people so that
Oh, I love that.
yeah, so that families get more of an authentic experience of the local culture. Sometimes when you're in a big city, you lose that feel of what
Mhm.
is this culture actually about. So we try to always be in a town that's got less than 100,000 people and that has a lot of rich culture and experiences nearby that the children and the parents alike can experience, right? So Portugal is such a rich country. There's so much history there. Their people are so beautiful, so genuine, so family oriented. There's so much art and culture that kids can dive into, whether it's tile painting or Portuguese cooking lessons. We felt like it was a great area for us to start, and it was surrounded by castles and greenery. So really kind of makes people feel like they're out of your typical environment back home where you're coming from.
Yeah, for sure, and you're not gonna be stuck in, like, a tourist trap or, that you're I think for me, a part of this piece that Boundless Life does really well is the immersion piece, and I feel like sometimes, like, when I lived in Sydney, I ended up just kinda grouping together with all the Canadian American expats, and we didn't really get a lot of, I mean, I'm married to an Australian, so I have an immersion to Australian culture, but it's kind of hard to break into the culture a little bit. So I love that you keep that smaller, and you're going to talk to your local barista, or you're going to, make a friend at the bakery down the street. So I think that's a really cool piece.
In Portugal, just on that note, there's like a gelato store that my kids always used to go to. And to this day, like every time we go back to Portugal and this Portuguese old woman sees my kids again, she literally starts bawling as if she's
Oh,
been reunited with her long lost, Indian grandchildren, which I find is so amazing because how else do you get that immersion with locals, where you get so intimate with them and you see them on a daily basis that they're part of your daily routine and end up feeling like family, even though you're in a completely different country.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I love that. And I think that just shows your kids as well that everyone is inherently the same. Like we all want the same things, and they're going to build bonds with you and cry when you leave. Like I just think that's so beautiful for them to have a little Portuguese family at the
Yeah,
gelato shop when they come back.
agreed.
Hey everyone, I just wanted to pop in here really quick to share something brand new. We have just launched our Transform with Travel community newsletter. And I know you're thinking, oh gosh, another email in my inbox, but I promise you, this newsletter is going to be worth your while. Every month, I'm going to be sharing how you can create meaningful travel experiences for you and your family, how to really build that adventurous spirit back into your life again, whether you're on the road or at home. Our top travel tips and trends, and beyond the ChatGPT trends. This is tried and true, had my feet on the ground recommendations, our insights on what's coming up and what's next, and so much more. I would love if you can join our newsletter, join our community. It's absolutely free. As a thank you, you'll receive in your inbox a guided meditation to help calm the nerves down while you're flying. Whether you love the beach or the mountains, whether you're a window seat gal or an aisle seat guy, whether you love culture or adventure, you have a space here within the Transform with Travel community. So please go to the show notes, click the link to join the newsletter, or you can head to my website, transformwithtravel.co. All right, thank you. Back to the show. You mentioned at the beginning about how when you were realizing that perhaps the traditional education system isn't what it's all cracked up to be, and that it's been the same for virtually 200 plus years. I've heard in this, in this sector of education that it's traditional education's been compared to kind of like a factory, right? Like they're sitting in rows like they're in a factory, and they raise their hand and they have to answer all these questions one by one. And they really, in my opinion, they reward the compliance over creativity. Like I was definitely a product of a kid that knew how to follow rules, and I did that really, really well. But my brother is a super creative thinker, out of the box, hated wearing a uniform, and he didn't do quote unquote well in school, but he's hands down the smartest person I know. So what are some of the biggest ways that you see the traditional education system, I guess, failing our kids these days?
Yeah, great question. I mean, first thing, I feel like the traditional education system groups kids by their birth year, right? And to me, that's something that is so outdated, right? Any parent like yourself who has more than one child knows that even in the same environment, right? Same parents, same environment, two kids are so different than one another. Yet in the traditional school system, we place kids in these boxes based on their birth year, and we expect them all to grow at the exact same pace at the exact same time. And that's radically different than what actually happens in the real world, right? In the real world, success is not determined by your age. It's shaped by your skill set, what experiences you had, what is your mindset, how adaptable are you, how do you collaborate with others? So, one thing that we felt really strongly about when we were building the Boundless education model is that we wanted to have multi-age classrooms where students are able to learn alongside others who are both older and younger than them, just like they would in real life. And to us, that's what encourages, leadership and empathy and more natural learning relationships and peer interaction. So I think that's one big thing is how kids are grouped. And then what you touched upon as well, right? Like this factory model treats kids like workers, right? There's bells, there's rigid schedules, everything's based on memorization, and you're not really encouraging courageous thinkers, you're creating these compliant citizens. So I think in this day and age, it's so important to build creativity, resilience, adaptability, and global awareness. And, I've seen firsthand with my own kids and so many kids that have had an experience like this, when you kind of transform, I'd say, like, let go of that rigid structure and start to trust children's natural ability and desire to learn. That's when you start seeing real transformation, right? Then you see kids who are no longer asking, hey, is this going to be on the test? And they start asking, hey, how
Mm-hmm.
can I make a difference? How can I add value? How can I add value to this world? And to me, that's the mindset that we want to be creating in kids, not just, factory workers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think about it. My youngest was really afraid of going in the pool. And the swim instructor that we worked with, who I didn't work with my first, was really taking her time. And she was like, I get a lot of families who just want this, like, learn how to swim in 5 days thing. And she's like, she will learn the skills, but what I'm really curious and what I'm really interested in is creating a love of swimming and a confidence
Mm,
in swimming. And that's what I'm kind of thinking of when you're talking about this, is creating a love of learning, which is going to take them way farther in a world where jobs are getting created left, right, and center that didn't exist not even 2 years ago. Like, you have to create a learning lover who's going to love to learn new skills rather than teaching the exact skills that were needed 10 years ago, because they're not even teaching skills that are needed right now.
totally. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
another thing that I think of, and I'm looking at it from the lens of, the United States, but I think this is kind of a westernized schooling, I guess, standard. But the concept of standardized tests, I mean, I definitely grew up taking standardized tests, and they've kind of been the gold standard for measuring student success. And especially in the United States, kids are just looked at as like walking test scores. It's not even about how they're feeling, how they're doing. If they're anxious, it's just like, what's their test score and how does this benefit the school? Why do you think standardized testing might not be the best way at measuring that student success? And what would be your alternative if you could replace it with something else?
Yeah, I mean, I think learning should be adaptive, right? Not standardized. Like we said, there's no two kids that are the same. So why should their education be the same? Kids need to learn how to kind of take a problem and be able to break it down, digest it, and be these creative thinkers themselves rather than just rote memorization to be able to regurgitate on a test. Like, I think of myself back in the day, I kind of figured out how to beat the system, right? So I knew how to get 100 on the test, but there was zero retention on anything I learned. So I might have gotten 100 on the test, but you asked me 24 hours later anything that had to do with that test, I couldn't tell you, right? Because, like you said, there was no love for learning. It was just memorizing to answer those questions and then moving on. So I think if we shift our learning to being more adaptive, to having fostering this love of learning and making it a lot more purposeful, I think that makes a really big difference as well, right? So why do we need to learn long division, right? Like, long division is so boring, and it's not, you have to learn it just to pass the test. But if you apply it to a real world problem, like the kids are working on a project and you're like, hey, in order to figure out how to solve poverty in, Ethiopia, we need to figure out how to divide the number of bananas that are available in this little village, and this is why we need to learn long division. You're adding purpose, you're adding meaning to learning a specific concept. And to me, that kind of hands-on experiential approach is what makes learning stick, right? That's what makes it sticky. You will never forget how to learn long division if you are applying it to a real world problem. You're adding meaning, you're adding purpose. That's when you feel like you're making a difference and you want to learn a certain concept. So I think the approach needs to really shift as well, as rather than just teaching concepts or theories, you need to add meaning and purpose to everything that's happening in a classroom.
Yeah, and you raise a really good point, because the jobs that will be created for our children and the world that's created for our children is very much going to be tackling those big issues. That's just not some, random example that you're giving. So I feel like giving them kind of a front row view of what is going to be ahead too, and what they're going to need the skills to be able to use that for. I guess that leads into my next question, that you speak about global citizenship and wanting that to be a core curriculum, or it is a core curriculum of Boundless Life's, programming, and that it needs to be a fundamental part of education. We kind of just touched on why, but what does that look like in practice? Why do you believe that global citizenship, global curriculum is essential in today's world?
With a world like ours, it's becoming more connected by the day.
Mm,
I think we used to look at global citizenship as just a luxury, something nice to put on your transcript. But I don't think that's the case anymore. I think it's a necessity, right? It's a necessity to teach kids how to be empathetic, how to be culturally aware, how to be globally minded. And it's not just something that should be a subject on the side, like a side unit. I think it's something that has to be embedded into everything that we do. And that's what we do at Boundless, right? It's embedded into global citizenship, is embedded into our projects, into the relationships, into the everyday life and schedule that our kids are in whatever destination they might be in. So our kids, for instance, they engage with the local community. So just yesterday here in Couture, our Trailblazer class went and joined the primary school down the street and got to understand, how do their schools work? What do they do? Learn the local language, explore what local challenges their communities face. And then through hands-on experiences, figuring out, hey, these are the challenges these people are facing. How can we contribute? And to me, that is what allows kids not only to grow academically, but to grow as human beings, right?
mhm.
And to me, that's what we want, especially in this evolving world where AI is going to be a huge part of our reality very soon, if not already. So how do we teach kids to grow as humans and in areas that, an AI bot can't do for you?
Yeah, it's so true. Like looking at the child as a whole person, and the world that they're going to be facing, they're going to have to be super adaptable and super creative. And I really appreciate that outlook, because I think that's what a lot of parents who listen to this podcast who are interested in traveling with their children, that's a core piece of why they want to travel with their children. But to think about it being embedded into the fundamental part of like a tenet of the educational system would be amazing to see on a worldwide scale. But at the very least, they can get that through a Boundless Life cohort. You mentioned a little bit how the older kids went to a local primary school to kind of understand the culture and understand the issues that they're facing. How else have you found that Boundless Life integrates things like cultural empathy? And I guess the language immersion is massive. That's huge for me. How does that get woven into the curriculum of it from like a day-to-day level?
Yeah, so we have a much bigger emphasis on place-based learning, right?
Mm,
So really getting the kids out of the classroom and into the local community. So not only do they learn the local language during their kind of culture time in class, but then they're leaving the classroom and integrating into the local communities to use that language, whether it's going to, in Bali, they went and interviewed local shopkeepers and had to interview them in Balinese
mhm.
to understand what are their pain points, because they were doing a project on how to help local businesses improve their business and their output. And so I think the more you not only learn a language, but then you go out and you actually use it and apply it, that's when things stick. So even when they were in Greece, they were working on an SDG on justice and peace. And, for that one, they went into the local courthouse and they, partook in a mock trial, and they interviewed the local Syros mayor to understand how they could actually make changes on the island of Syros that would benefit the locals as well as, the expats. So through these kind of hands-on experiences, they're not just doing schools, but they're actually solving real world problems with real people in real places. And then learning doesn't just feel like learning, but they feel like they're helping. And that's to me the power of, global place-based education that uses the world as your classroom.
Like, they don't even know they're learning. They're just
No,
having fun.
exactly.
One thing that came into my mind was, how do you build those relationships with those local communities to be able to have the kids even enter? Because I can imagine it wouldn't just be like, knock, 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 here's 15 kids ready to ask you questions about your local shop. What's the process for Boundless Life to be able to build such deep connections that they trust these essentially foreign kids and foreign families coming in?
Yeah, when we launch a new location, we always hire local staff as well, right? So we have a mix from the education standpoint. We have a mix of international teachers that are kind of the lead educators for each classroom, but then we make sure we have half of our staff that are local, born and raised in the area that we are in. And between our community manager and experience manager, a lot of them have connections in the local community, and they're able to integrate our population right in with the locals right from the get-go. So I think that blend of having local staff at each location really allows us to just kind of get right in there and be part of the community.
I love that. Do you have any examples of students who have experienced any transformational learning through this global lens? Like, do you have any stories of students that you've seen kind of go through this process and learn about themselves in such a powerful way?
Yeah, I always think back to our very first cohort when we were in Sintra. There was a family who joined us from Poland, and they had, I think, three boys. They were in the program it was just a 3 month, they did a 3 month cohort with us. And when they joined, none of the boys spoke English. Okay. So they had no understanding of English language. And, so everyone was a little nervous, like, how are they going to get through this? And by the end of the cohort, after 12 weeks, I'll never forget, it was the learning celebration, and they had just worked on sustainable development goal. And this young boy went up onto the stage and recited this entire poem that he worked on about climate change in English and
Oh,
presented
wow.
it to the entire group. And it was so moving. It was so meaningful. And he did it in a language that he couldn't even speak, 11 weeks before when he entered. And I don't think there was a dry eye in the room that day,
Oh,
because it was so it was our first kind of taster, I think, of how much change a child can go through in such a short amount of time in so many different ways, not just academically, but socially. And and he was a very timid boy as well. So for him to be standing on the stage speaking in a completely different language, it reinforced what I believe at the core is that every single one of us has this like life force power inside of us. And, I believe that our duty as a society and as an education system is to help every child recognize that power that's within them, and then give them the skills and tools that they need to use that power to add value into the world. And I'll never forget that day, because it was like, okay, this is a model that will make big change in the world.
oh my God. I got goosebumps as you were talking about that because it just really allows the kid to shine in their own way and not be forced into a box like we do with so many of our kids here, and how powerful that will be to see a generation of kids who are taught and educated and raised in that way. I think it's exciting to see that come together. And something that I would imagine is on top of the local cultures that these kids are and families as well. We're speaking mostly about kids because it's the educational system, but the parents are taking away so much away from these experiences as well. But one thing I could imagine is not just learning from Balinese culture or Portuguese culture, but the intermingling of different cultures of families coming together, because you guys get such a wide range of people all over the world. Have you seen how those friendships are formed and how that transforms the kids?
It's so magical, like, because you have families joining us from so many different countries. I remember when we did the Tuscany cohort, so we were in Italy and we had just started. It was probably like two weeks in, and my son came home from school and he's like he's like talking in a completely foreign language, and he's like, he'd learned so much. And I was like, oh wow, Mahan, you've really picked up on Italian like so quickly. I'm so impressed. And he looks at me and he's like, oh, that's not Italian, that's Hebrew, right? And
Oh.
I'm like, what? you know? And because one of the Boundless families was living right next door to us, and they were from Israel. And, they would invite him over every Friday night for Shabbat dinner.
Mhm.
And within 2 weeks, here he was living in Italy for the first time. Not only is he immersed into Italian culture, but he's also immersed into Israeli culture and learning Hebrew and partaking in their family rituals on a weekly basis. And I thought that was so beautiful, right? Because there's so much to learn from the cultures that we are integrated in at these destinations. But then there's so much to learn from all the other families that are part of a cohort with us. And you end up getting immersed into other families' cultures and traditions, which is, again, so beautiful because what you start to recognize is, and what I want for all of our children, is that you start to see the similarities in people's families and cultures rather than the differences that I think the world tends to see more of. And, that's my goal, is how do we raise this next generation of children who see that common red thread that flows through every person in every country and unites us rather than divides.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how cool to have these friends from all over the world and then potentially meet up again at another country or another cohort. And one question that I have is how do you manage the movement, I guess, with the kids, like in terms of moving from one cohort to the next? Or what are some of the obstacles that you see that families come to you guys like, hey, I really want to do this, but I'm worried about XYZ? What are some of the common, whether it's education or whether it's just the lifestyle? Do you have common limitations that you see families place on themselves?
Well, one thing that we've done to kind of alleviate that is every single one of our education centers are built in the exact same way. So
I
same
love that.
furniture, same posters, same schedule, same routine. So even when children or families are moving from one Boundless location to the next, the adaptation time is really short because the routine, the environment, everything is the exact same across all of our destinations. So I think that really helps, especially with younger kids, to feel more at home a lot quicker. Another thing that we do for new families that are joining us for the first time, we build out what we call the 360 profile of every child before they even arrive on destination. So someone from our admissions team will have a very in-depth conversation with the parents and the child themselves to understand, hey, how does this child learn? Are they an auditory learner? Do they learn through movement? Are they more visual? What are their favorite books? What are their favorite movies? How do they interact with others? And that 360 profile is then given to every educator before the child even arrives. So it kind of gives every teacher a head start on being able to build a more individualized or personalized approach to learning for every child that meets them where they're at. And I think when you come to a new location, you're in a new country, and here you have this teacher who already knows so much about you before you've even walked in the door, I think alleviates a lot of those stressful moments that might occur when you're, moving to a new country.
Yeah, because I think a lot of it's just uncertainty and knowing, are they gonna know, everything there is for this one child, or how is this going to pan out? I find with even just leading group trips, it's only a week long, but it's that uncertainty that causes a lot of the self-placed limitations. Like, I can't go on this trip because I don't know how this is gonna pan out. So I think that would alleviate a lot, like you said, a lot of that pressure of the parents to kind of feel like they have to have everything figured out. It's like, okay, no, they have it figured out for me. It's all good. And so you spoke about your son and his interaction with, the Israeli family and learning Hebrew and going to Shabbat, and a lot of that is like the differences in religion and differences in culture. You yourself have embraced local traditions as part of your family's education, and you experienced, I'm going to say this wrong, Nepi in Bali.
Nepi, yeah, Nepi,
Nepi.
you got it, yeah.
Could you explain your experience with your family experiencing that tradition in Bali and how those cultural rituals shape learning in ways that like textbooks really could never explain?
Yeah, sure. So last year when we were in Bali around this time of year, they celebrate this day called Nepi, where the entire island has no electricity, no phones, no light on, no talking. It's literally a day of silence. And, for my family, I just found it to be such a profound experience to have as our unit of four. We got a little tree house in the middle of the jungle, and that's where we went to spend Yepi. So, and we really took it seriously, like we didn't use any electricity, we didn't talk to each other. We really just embraced being surrounded by stillness and silence. And for most, families, that could be scary, especially when you have kids, who are used to talking or used to doing things all the time. But for us, like, I found that day taught us like so much more than any lesson plan ever could. It was like this reminder that a day of reflection and silence is actually essential to learning, because it's through those mindful pauses that you take that we actually grow. I think our society is so used to like doing, doing, doing. And, days like this, whether it's Nepi or going back to like my bed rest, where I was also forced to
Right,
pause and
right.
just reflect, I think so much can come out of moments of pause and reflection. And what that experience gave to us as a family was that, first of all, hey, we can do this, right? We can pause. We can be really intentional to put a pause in our lives. And there's so much that can come out of moments like that, whether it's starting your own company or coming up with a brilliant idea. Like, our society in this day and age is so used to always doing something or always being busy that half of the creativity moments get lost because we're always doing something. Creativity actually gets sparked when you stop and you allow that kind of life force within you to surface and see what other opportunities are there. So kind of experiencing Nepi for us as a family was something that we really enjoyed, and a tradition that we now take back with us. So our goal is, okay, every year, wherever we are in the world, we're going to practice Nepi. We're going to practice a day of complete silence, complete stillness, and see what kind of things can emerge from a ritual like that.
I really love that, and I think one thing that you said that really stuck out for me was giving our kids the space to try. Like, I feel like for so many parents, it's like, "Well, my kids will just never do that. My kids would just never be able to do that. We would like," and it's just like, well, we haven't even given them the space to try, and we don't give our kids as much credit. I hear that all the time, like, "Oh, I really wanna go to Ireland with my kids, but they just wouldn't be able to handle the flight." And it's like, "Well, you haven't tried, and maybe it won't be great, but at least you tried, and 9 times out of 10, they'll probably surprise you and sleep anyways." So I feel like just that spirit of letting them try something new, or I really appreciate that mindset of giving them the space to surprise you, and now you can take that with your family everywhere you go. And I think another piece of that is the integration piece, is doing something in a new country or in a new place, doesn't have to be a new country, realizing the benefits of it that you've experienced, and then weaving that and integrating that into your daily life, whether that's back home or whether that's in another cohort destination that you're in, is learning the pieces of the culture that really benefited your life and expanded your life, and then actively integrating that and not just letting that be an experience to be an experience, bringing that into your everyday life. That's something we talk about a lot on the podcast, but also after our group trips, is like, okay, so you had an amazing time spending 7 straight days in nature, and you feel calm and you feel awesome. Like, when you go back home, yeah, 7 straight days in nature might not be possible, but 30 minutes for a walk every day could be possible. Do you find that families that are in every destination is different, but do you find that that is a common thread? Like, they find something that really has stood out for them, and then you see them later down the track and they're integrating that in their everyday?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even with our model, the way we set up a boundless location is that we have the education center and the co-working space within like a 15 radius walk from any of the apartments. So even the lifestyle itself, when you're living in a boundless location, is you're walking everywhere, and it's very different than our North American lifestyle, where we're used to jumping in a car to
Mhm.
go get groceries or drop our kids to school. Everything's within a vehicle. And I mean, myself, I see that firsthand whenever I go back to Montreal. All of a sudden I got to get back in the van to like get groceries or see my parents. And it's kind of forced me to be like, hey, like, I thrive when I'm walking around and like outside, walking, using my body to go do whatever I need to do. So it's much more difficult when I'm back home, but I have to carve out time to make sure I'm going for a minimum, at least an hour walk every single day, because I know the effects that it has on my mind, on my attitude, on my emotions. I'm just happier, right? When I'm walking around places. So I think little things like that you learn by living abroad in a different country, it almost becomes a necessity. You're like, oh, I can't go back to living any differently, so I have to integrate some of these things into my daily life.
And for parents who are listening who are super keen, they're like, okay, all this sounds amazing. It's, aligns with my values. I want to bring global learning into my kid's life, but I'm not at a stage right now where I can take 3 months or, even go for a week. I can't travel extensively. What are some ways that you think that parents can bring global curriculum into their lives, even when they're at their home in wherever home is for them?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I don't think you absolutely need to get on a plane to be able to raise a global citizen. I think you can definitely start at home by being more intentional on inviting the world into your home. I think all of us as human beings, we tend to stick to what we know, or hang out with the community members that are part of our comfort zone. So I think little things like, inviting a family that you would never have over typically to your house to learn from them, cooking meals from different countries, or maybe reading stories about different cultures, kind of getting out of your comfort zone and attending maybe local festivals that you typically wouldn't really be interested in. I think there's so many ways, even in our own backyard, that you can explore different cultures if you put the intention towards it. And I think that's a great way to start. And just having this really curious mindset, as a family, and just being like, hey, how can I learn more? How can I integrate with families from different countries or different cultures? Like, my son and I, we lived next to the Israeli family when we were in Tuscany, but I'm sure back in Montreal, there's, my neighbors probably from another country as well, but I wouldn't necessarily take the steps to go and invite them over or spend time with them when you're back in your own environment. So I think that's really important. It's stepping out of your comfort zone and going to make time for the world to enter your own home will go a long way.
I really, really love that, and it's such a mindset shift. You're so right. Like, how many people around us are all from different cultures, and what's that mindset piece where we're like, we won't engage at home, but for some reason, when we're traveling, our minds are more open and we're happy having all these
Mm.
conversations. It's such an interesting mindset shift. I think of during COVID, my cousin, she's an amazing cook, and her daughter was home with her because there was no school. And every day they created, I think for 100 something days straight, they created a different dish from a different country. Like they would plan it out,
Wow.
they'd go to the different stores that they needed to get all the stuff in. And I remember asking my cousin's daughter, so the little girl, I'm like, what was your favorite dish that you cooked from? She was like, Kuwait. And I was like, oh, okay. Like this 8-year-old is talking about Kuwait and this dish that they made, and they had to go to all these
Wow.
different shops and all these different things to get what they needed. So you're so right. Like it can happen at home, and it just takes a little bit of ingenuity and curiosity, like you mentioned. And that's such a great way to kind of kickstart that global curriculum. And I guess that's a way that schools can integrate it as well. I guess I'd love to know, like, you're such a visionary in the educational space. What is your vision for education? I originally was going to ask in the next 10 to 20 years, but God knows what's going to happen in 10 to 20 years. What's your vision for education in the next 5 years?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. I mean, my vision really is a system where learning is a lot more personalized, it's global, and it's hands-on, it's experiential, right? So I would love to see, we have 7 destinations right now of boundless locations. In the next 5 years, I'd love to see, 20 locations of boundless education centers and destinations where families can just easily plug in and out of any one of our destinations and get this really immersive, personalized approach to education. That's what I would love to see in the next 5 years. And then in the next 10 years, I think there's an opportunity to bring these education centers to major cities around the world, right? So not only are you spending 3 months in these wow destinations of little towns across the world you'd never go to, but then when you head back home, whether that's Montreal or New York City or wherever you're coming from, your child can plug right back into that same education and, not miss a beat. So that's what I'd love to see in 10 years. And let's see if we get there.
So you said 7 destinations, and we've mentioned Portugal, Tuscany, Bali. And you mentioned Syros, Greece. Can you share a couple of the other destinations? And then I'd love to touch on your most recent destination that you launched and what kind of like brought that to light.
Yeah, sure. So our first location was Portugal, then we opened in Greece, then in Tuscany, then Bali, Montenegro, where I'm calling from today, in Spain. So those were our 6 existing locations. And then just last week, we opened our 7th location, which is in La Barra, Uruguay, which we're really excited about. This is our first South American destination, which is going to be great for a lot of our, North American clients who are looking for time zones that work with their work schedule. So yeah, in 7 destinations and growing every year.
I love that you launched Uruguay because I remember speaking to Elodie about it last year and you hadn't officially launched it yet. And as soon as she mentioned it, I was like, oh, I think I've heard of that country before, but let me go look it up. And then I started looking it up and I looked up the town that you were in and I was like, oh my God, I think this town was like literally built for me, me and my family. It's so cute. What was it about Uruguay out of all of the South American and even Central American? Because I'm sure there are some hotspot countries that people have been asking for. Like, what was it specifically about Uruguay? Because not many people have heard of it, but what was it about, this tiny little country in the bottom of South America that stuck out for you guys as a location?
Yeah, I think we're all about finding these like hidden gems, that not everyone has heard about. And La Barra specifically is just the coastal living, being right by the water, the views. It's really safe as well as a destination in South America compared to some of the other countries. It just ticked all the boxes, and the ability to immerse, all of our families into this culture, whether it's dance or their food. It just made complete sense out of all the locations that we were looking at in South America. And I myself am looking forward to joining the cohort in January next year with the Trailblazers. It looks gorgeous, and there's so much natural beauty around, which is always a big selling point for all of our families, right? How do you immerse yourself in the natural habitat of the world has to offer us? And Uruguay definitely had beautiful, beautiful coastal views and stuff.
Yeah, I love it. I love that it's like you guys are putting places on the map. Like now I'm seeing it everywhere. I'm like, okay, I have to get down there. That's how it looks amazing. One thing I just want to, I guess, maybe wrap up with is what's the process? Again, if someone was like, wow, this sounds incredible. I've listened to Elodie's episode. I've listened to Rekha's episode. I want to jump in. What would kind of be the process for a family getting started? And then you've also mentioned Trailblazers. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah, I mean, we offer many different programs at Boundless. So we have a summer program for those who, aren't ready to pull their kids out of their school. We do 3 months, 6 months, 9 month programs at any of our destinations. So if you are interested in learning more, you could go to our website and book a discovery call with any of our family reps, and they would walk you through, what the program looks like and all the different availabilities in the different countries. So up until this year, we were servicing children between the ages of 1 and 12. And then in September, we launched a new program called Trailblazers, which is kind of a middle school program for 13 to 14-year-olds. What we did this year is we accepted 20 students from around the world, and their families committed to 1 year abroad with Boundless. So all of these families, we started together in Bali, and then we all moved together to Greece, and now we've all moved together here to Montenegro, which is a really interesting model, especially for older kids, right? Because as kids become teenagers, their peer group becomes much more essential in their development. So we wanted to make sure that there was this continuity of friends that were moving with them to all these different countries. And it's been such a beautiful experience to have these group of 20 teenagers from around the world reuniting in 3 different countries. There's this kind of feel of kind of co-parenting. Everyone's going through the same struggles at the same time and helping one another out. It's been a really beautiful process.
How amazing as well for these kids to get I mean, like, every age is formative, but at such a critical time in your development and in your self-esteem and self-confidence to be like building these skills in the real world as a 13 and 14-year-old is such a powerful gift as a parent to be able to give that to them. How cool.
Yeah, yeah. And with this program, we're putting a big emphasis on soft skills and competencies, right? So how do we equip these young adults to be able to, be efficient note takers and do proper research and be excellent public speakers and be able to, apply design thinking methodologies to any problem that they might occur in life so that they're equipped with these future ready skills that I think everyone's going to need for this unknown future that we're walking into.
Yeah, and I guess as well, not that again everything is based on your job and based it's definitely not based on a college degree, but in a world where it's hyper competitive, especially in the United States and I imagine Canada as well, hyper competitive to get into higher education, to have such a differentiator on your resume that you spent a year in all these different places. I know now a lot of universities, if you can't get in, they're offering like a study abroad program for your first 6 months to be able to then feed into the school into the United States. So there is this trend of even universities being like, we need kids that have global competency attending our schools. So you're already getting a little bit of that leg up as well in terms of if the kid decided that they wanted to go to college or that it was necessary for them, that it's kind of making them stand out in such a positive way.
Yeah, exactly. That's, something else we're working on is this year went well with the 13 and 14-year-olds, and there seems to be a demand, as kids get older and older. So can we build out in a hybrid model, an education solution that takes kids up to 18, up to university, and just like you mentioned, right, like create some sort of like internship program for a year abroad before you join university. With the way the world is changing, your SAT scores aren't as important as portfolio based, right? So the people want to see like, what projects have you worked on? Where have you been? What have you done? How have you contributed to the world? So I think a boundless experience is really set up to build out a portfolio in a very unique way.
So we'll stay tuned to see about that internship program in high school. You guys have a lot on your plate, don't you?
We do, yeah. Big dreamers.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing more about Boundless Life and more about, your thoughts around education. And what I love about Boundless Life is that it offers so much for so many different families. And I think I already know I have like 3 or 4 friends that are actively researching Boundless Life now. So I'm hoping to get a little cohort of friends to all go down together. We wrap up our episodes with these 3 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. So number 1 is, what country or place has made the biggest impact on you?
I would say Bali.
Oh, okay. Why?
Yeah. I love Southeast Asia. I love kind of like the chaos that's there,
Uh-huh.
and at the same time, the deep stillness that exists amongst the chaos. I just find that so beautiful. And the people are so genuine. Like when you go buy milk from the store, they thank you like, they've had the honor of being able to sell you milk. And I just find that type of culture and people are the type of people I want my kids to grow up with. So it was just very impactful, and I would love to go back there any day.
Yeah, I feel the same about Bali. And what you just mentioned was so true. The duality between the absolute utter chaos at any given moment, but then you look down on the floor and there's the little offering on the floor with the beautiful mandala of the flowers, and you're like, okay, these 2 things can exist at the same time.
Yeah. It's a beautiful reminder just for life,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
absolutely. So number 2 is, what is your must-have travel item?
Oh my God. Okay. I always travel with like a suitcase of Indian spices.
Oh.
We're of Indian descent, and it takes a while to find an Indian store and get all your spices. So without a fail, like my mom packs me these like Ziploc bags with like 20 different spices, and I never leave home without them. So that whatever location we're setting up our new apartment in, we're ready to cook right from day one.
I love that. One of our previous guests and a really good friend of mine, Dr. Shivani Gupta, she said the exact same thing. She's like, all my spices. She's actually has a PhD in turmeric, and she was like, I bring my specific blend of all these spices.
Wow.
So
So
that
funny.
surprisingly, that's not the first time we've heard that answer on the podcast.
It's good to know. Good to know I'm not the only crazy one.
And then number 3 is, what is the biggest life lesson you've learned through traveling?
When you remove your family unit from their comfort zone, I think that's what connects people on a much deeper level, right? So, as close as our unit was back home, and we spent tons of time together, being able to travel together and live in a foreign country where we have no idea how to read anything at the grocery store, or how to work the washer dryer machine, and trying to figure out those things together as a unit and having these shared first experiences, I think has been the most powerful way to build a deeper connection than I had ever anticipated. So travel has definitely, I think, brings people together on a much deeper level.
Thank you so much for being here today and for sharing. And yeah, super excited for our community to learn more about you and learn more about the program. If they wanted to connect with you online or connect with Boundless Life, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, we're on Boundless Life is on Instagram, on LinkedIn. You can follow us directly on our website, boundless.life. That's the best way to connect with any of us.
Amazing. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I walked away with so many insights and so many aha moments. I really just reflected a lot on my own education history and how it might have served me and how it might not have. And really just this empowerment to make new choices as a family and as a society. Really appreciate Rekha's time. Really appreciate the amazing business that she's created with her co-founders to create an opportunity for families who value globally competent families and children, and compassion and culture is something that really ticked a lot of boxes for me. If it also ticked a lot of boxes for you and you are now down the rabbit hole of which one of the 7 locations are we going to move my family to, whether it's one of their summer camps, whether it's over the holidays, they have a 3-week December cohort, or one of their 3-month cohorts, potentially a full year, who knows? The sky's the limit. If you are interested in joining, you please use my referral code. You'll get an exclusive discount if you do. It's KELTOL11. So KELTOL11. Again, KELTOL11. It's linked in the show notes below. Be sure to use that to grab your exclusive discount for the next cohort that you might potentially join. I'll see you on the next episode. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for tuning in to the Transform with Travel podcast. If you have a friend or a loved one you were thinking of during this episode, spread a little love and share this episode with them, someone who could use a little inspiration. And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe to the podcast as well. To learn more about us, head to www.transformwithtravel.co, and I'll see you on the next episode. This is your reminder to keep on exploring.